brought up the thing that the meeting's being recorded differently on my computer. I'm not sure why. Anyway, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's study. Before we begin, can you join me in a word of prayer? Dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful for the time that we have here this morning as we open your word together. We invite your Spirit to direct our minds, to teach us, and we pray, Lord, that the things we study will be meaningful and purposeful in our lives. We're thankful for what you've been showing us in Daniel chapter 11, and we ask for your continued guidance in these studies. We pray for each person. You know the struggles we face each day, the challenges of living in this world of sin and our own natures. And so we submit our hearts to you. We ask for forgiveness, that you can change us from the inside out. Be with us now through thy Spirit, we pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. So just before the study, Jeff asked a question regarding the word iteration. And that's, you can see there in the center of the screen there for H4550, certainly. And that has this word yet, 5750, which means an iteration. And that word is the same word that says within 60 and 5 years shall Ephraim be broken. That word within and the word yet here, these are the same words. And within is probably not the best way to translate that. So we know that 65-year prophecy, it's this word od, right? So it's it means going around or a continuance, still, yet, again, besides. It can be a continuance or persistence. It can be an addition or repetition. So I'm taking it here as a repetition. So just to clarify this point, because I think it's an important point. So it's going to talk about this history here of Octavian and Anthony, where it shall be in these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, both these kings' hearts, and they shall speak lies at one table, form false alliances, right? But it shall not prosper. Now we know that in the verses before, 25 and 26, it's going to cover the Battle of Actium, and that's going to be the end of Egypt. And then it's going to go back to Octavian and Antony's alliance, and it's going to say that this is a type for when it says for yet, or it will be repeated at the end, which shall be at the time appointed, right? So we take the end and the time appointed to refer to the period of time from February 15th, 1798 to the end of the prophetic periods, which are going to end October 22nd, 1844. So it's just saying that this history here, in connection with what happens with this alliance between Octavian and Antony, that it would not last, that it's typifying something that's going to happen at the end of the world. And if we think about what happened with 1798, France is the power that put the papacy upon the throne of the earth, correct? In 538. Would we agree with that statement?
Yes.
Okay. And it's going to be France that's then going to remove them from the throne of the earth, right? It's going to take the Pope captive. So you can see here that this alliance does not stand, right? So it says it's going to be at the time appointed. Now, so it's going to talk about the end of the prophetic periods, October 22nd, 1844. Now, we match that in our history to the Sunday law. Then shall he, the king of the north, return into his land with great riches. So that's going to be with after the battle of Actium and then the conquering of Egypt. And then pagan Rome's heart shall be against the Holy Covenant. So the next thing that's going to happen is that after Rome gets Egypt, it's going to grow, its empire is going to grow, but also it's going to persecute God's people, right? So that's going to be pagan Rome, right? So that's what when he says he shall do, I crossed out exploits, but this is just his persecution. And he's going to return into his own land. So he's going to persecute, he's going to return into his own land. And then it says, at the time appointed, now we would say normally that's October 22nd, 1844. But here in this case, it's now pointing to our history because this is the repetition of that history. He, the papacy, the USA, the king of the north, shall return and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former. So in the former, they do come towards the south, right? That is the Battle of Actium. The king of the north is going to defeat the king of the south. So it's going to be like that, right? The same thing. The king of the north is going to defeat the king of the south in 1989. But it shall not be as the former. And the way that it's not as the former is it's actually not dealing with the literal north and the literal south, right? Or as the latter. Now, the latter is the fall of the Western Roman Empire. At least that's how we've taken it at this point. And we were discussing yesterday how it's not the same. Now, so Dwight, you just showed up. So we were discussing this idea about this repeat of history. That is that word yet, the iteration. So I'm just going to go back and quickly explain that.
Right.
So it says, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. And I'm saying that word yet means that this is going to be repeated. So it's going to take all of this alliance that happened in the Battle of Actium, and it just like France put the papacy on the throne of the earth in 538, it's going to remove them in 1798. And so it's saying that this history is going to be repeated. That is, what happens at the time of the end in 1798 is going to be repeated. And then it's going to go back and talk about that history after the Battle of Actium and after the persecution of the Christians, right? Being against the Holy Covenant. Rome returns into its own land. Now, so I guess the controversial part here is that when it says at the time appointed, the papacy in the US, the king of the north, in November 9th, 1989, shall return and come towards the south. So I'm saying that this is the king of the north against the king of the south. So it can't be 1798. At least that's the conclusion I came to, that it must be 1989. Right? And we couldn't say, well, the king of the north comes against the king of the south, and it's not like what happened in Egypt in the sense that, it's the south and the north are reversed or anything like that. Right? It has to be the king of the north coming against the king of the south. Does not happen in 1798. It does happen in 1989. And so what I'm saying is that when it talks about what happens in 1798 is going to be repeated, that this is now describing when it's going to be repeated. But it says it will not be as the former. So the former is going to be when the king of the north defeated the king of the south in 30 BC, right? And we're saying that is different because it's not the literal king of the north and the literal king of the south. It's actually spiritual, not literal. So that we can agree on, right? That makes sense?
Logical.
Okay. Now, when it says as the latter, so we have taken the latter as to be what's going to be talked about next, right? That is, that's going to be the ships of Kittim coming in and conquering Western Rome. we're saying that the latter is the next thing that's going to be talked about, because it's already talked about the Battle of Actium. Now, we could have said, well, maybe the latter is, 1798. So that is another possibility, but the latter isn't referring to what's going to be mentioned next. And we had considered that, but I've taken that the latter is what's going to happen next in verse 30, right? So if it's the same as, because it is the same, it's a repeat of something, this history is being repeated. And this is the history of November 9th, 1989 that it's talking about. It has characteristics similar to the Battle of Actium. It's the North against the South. But it's not literally the North and not literally the South. And then it's like the fall of Western Rome, but it's also not like the fall of Western Rome. And that's the part that we haven't been able to say, why is it not like the latter? What is it that differs? Now, in the latter, it's going to be the ships of Kittim, that's these Germanic tribal invasions, that come against Western Rome. Therefore, he shall be grieved and return and have indignation, the 1260 years of the daily, against the Holy Covenant. So it's going to deal with that indignation. That's what we would call the first part of the indignation, right? So paganism is persecuting God's people in that history. And so shall he do, right? And we had that so shall he do earlier in verse 28. And he shall do, right? So this has to do with his persecution. And he, pagan Rome, shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. So the return we place is 410 AD. That's in the response to these Germanic invasions. And then he has intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. And we decided that was apostate Christianity. So these are the negotiations that are going to be going on with pagan Rome in adopting Christianity. Okay, so that's going to happen in that period of time. And then when we get to verse 31, an arm shall stand on his part, this is going to be the baptism of Clovis in 508. So there's a logical consistency through this. The thing that we have to try to understand is it shall not be as the former or as the latter. So in what way is it not as the latter? So we had a suggestion that has something to do with the fact that it's not the papacy itself, or in this case, Rome being an example of the papacy, but it's going to be the United States that brings in the Sunday law. But I don't know if that's the best way to describe it. So any discussion on that? I'm just going to look here at the Hebrew.
The first Sunday law of 321 was Rome.
Yeah. Okay. So we have Constantine's Sunday law in 321. We also have a Sunday law in 538.
Latter days would be.
Right. So we have a Sunday law in 538 as well.
United States represents Rome, part of Rome.
Yeah, so when we're dealing with the fall of Western Rome here, and it says it's not going to be as the former, so we understand the Egypt part, or as the latter. Now we put here, well, that is, the word latter means Western, right? That's what the word latter literally means. And I'm not sure why, how that they use the word Western to describe latter. I guess probably that's the later part of the day. You got the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, so that's the latter. That could be where they get the idea of of using that word to refer to something that comes after, maybe, right? But it does mean Western. And so we're saying that this addresses Western Rome, not just because of the word latter, but because of what's the context here. So then it says, in which the ships of Kittim shall come against him. So the power that's coming here is a Germanic power coming against Western Rome. Now here, we're dealing with the papacy and the United States coming against the king of the north, or which is the king of the north coming against the king of the south. So in this case, it's not really the king of the south, the north coming against the king of the south, right? So it's typifying it, but maybe the way that it's not as the latter is it's not, there isn't this a one-to-one equivalence of these kingdoms in that same way, that this is an outside power that causes the fall of Rome. So the fall of Western Rome is typifying the fall of the Soviet Union. Now, there are some similarities between Rome and the Soviet Union in that the Soviet Union is divided up, right? And we can see that happens with Rome itself. So it's going to be divided up into these different kingdoms. And maybe that's what the point is. That it's similar in that way, but it's not the same powers. Does that make sense?
Well, okay. In dealing with this from Daniel 11:29.
Yeah.
The point that you're addressing, especially where we're looking at the former or as the latter.
Yeah.
We have this Hebrew word rishon, which is a derivative of Hebrew 7221.
Yeah, and well, it's related to the word Rosh, which
Okay.
is first or chief or head, right?
Right. Now, making use of the rule of first mention.
Well, that's going to be really it's the first word in the Bible. If you actually look at the root word here, because the first word in the Bible is Bereshit, and that's just another, right?
But the Rishon,
Mm-hmm.
the first time it comes up is Genesis 8:13.
Okay. So in Genesis 8:13, that's going to be dealing with Noah, right? Okay. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, the first day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth, and Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. Is that the verse?
Okay, that's the verse.
And it's the first month.
Okay, but right.
Yeah.
As we're looking at this, two different words are being used for first.
Yeah, and there's a good reason why.
Okay.
Right? Because the one first, Ichad, first day of the month, is just the number one. The other first means the beginning.
Right.
Right? So one is the beginning of the month on the first day is really, right? Because and in some ways you could even say it's the beginning of the year, because it's referring to Noah's 601st birthday, right? So it's at the beginning of his 601st year on the first day of the month.
Does this have a symbolic presence for us, since they're in English, would be 3 firsts being listed.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the thing I would say is it's Daniel 8 or Genesis 8:13, which gives us this Fibonacci sequence, right? That we have in Daniel 8:13,
Okay.
right? Palmoni, right? So it's a symbol of Palmoni, 8 notes to an octave in a diatonic scale, 13 notes to an octave in a chromatic scale, right? So it's just part of God's design. It's the fingerprint. And here it's going to be used in connection with the flood and dealing with Noah's 601st year. I don't know if I would take the 3 firsts as a symbol here. I mean, you're saying like 111?
No.
Okay, I don't know. Then what?
Okay, I'm trying to relate this back to the 3 angels message.
Yeah, I don't know if I would do that.
Okay. So,
but what I would say here is that this is connected to Palmoni. So this verse by itself is important, though I don't know if I would connect it here to what we're doing in Daniel chapter 11 specifically.
well,
It's
what I'm
not really the first mention, because this word, I mean, because you've taken one of the other, because you got Bereshit, you got Bishan, you got Rosh. All of these are based upon, well, the root is Rosh, right? And that word, the first form it shows up in is Roshit, right? In the beginning, Bereshit, the B at the end means in the beginning, which is the first verse of the Bible, which is Genesis 1:1, right? So, so it's just a symbol of the first day of the first month is what I would look at as the symbol, not so much the 3 angels' messages with the 3 firsts.
well, what I'm trying to drive at here,
Mhm.
your point is accepted that this would be the word first or the word beginning.
Mhm.
Now, when we come to this with the latter,
Yeah. So 314.
314, Akaron,
Yeah. Akaron.
which again is a derivative of Hebrew 309, which can mean hinder, or it can also be Western as they are facing east.
Yeah.
So could we apply this with Daniel 11:29 to say, but it shall not be as the first or as the Western?
Well, that's what I'm saying is the Western. Yeah. That's what I'm saying is it's related to the Western, and we're dealing with Western Rome.
But are we also dealing with the situation with the literal armies of Rome today because they are coming from the West?
No.
Okay.
No. So first we interpret it historically, and then we apply the history and the repeat of history. So in this context, it's just saying that what happens at the end of the world in 1989, right, which is this time appointed that's referred to in verse 29, that it's going to have characteristics that are similar to what happened with Egypt. That is, the fall of Egypt is a battle between the North and the South, and we're going to have a battle between the North and the South. But it's not going to be literally the North and the South. It's going to be figuratively the North and the South. Because definitely, to try to call the Soviet Union the South, it's pretty North. And to call the papacy in the United States the king of the North, well, it's a lot more South, right? So obviously it's not talking about that in a literal sense. And they're also not occupying those territories of Turkey and Egypt, right? So we're saying it's typifying that because it's going to be the king of the north coming against the king of the south, but not literally. So that's why it shall not be as the former. So it's describing it, but there's a characteristic that's different. And it says, or as the latter. Now, the latter would be referring to what's going to happen in verse 30. That's the fall of Rome, right? Now, so, I mean, we could even say it shall not be as the first and the last, right? I mean, it's another way we could say it, the former and the latter. We could just say first and last. But it's not talking about that principle of first and last, right? It's just saying that we have these two different events. They're both typifying what's going to happen in 1989, but there are ways in which they don't typify. And so when we look at verse 30, for the ships of Kittim shall come against him. So these are, what's going to happen in that history in the early 400s, right? They shall come against him. Therefore, he shall be grieved in return. That's going to be 410. And have indignation against the Holy Covenant. So this is going to be the first end of the indignation, which is paganism persecuting God's people in this history. That's why so shall he do. That's what it's referring to. Now it says, he shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. So apostate Christianity is going to have intelligence with paganism, pagan Rome. And in so doing, we're going to have this transition from pagan Rome to papal Rome. So the question is, how is it not the same as this? That is, how is what happens in 1989 not the same as what has happened with the fall of the Roman Empire? And so far, we can see all the parallels, but we can't see how it's not that way. Okay, makes sense? Now, maybe there's something wrong with how we're reading the verse itself. Now, some different translations translate this differently. Some translations are, they're not generally reliable translations, but they're paraphrases. One says, at the time fixed, he'll come back and come into the south, but in the latter time, it will not be as it was before. So that's one way they translate the Hebrew. This other one says, this is Bishop's Bible, so this is before the King James. It says, at the time appointed, he shall come again and go toward the south, but the last shall not be as the first. And I actually kind of like that translation better than what I see in the King James. And this is actually a really common way in which it's translated by a lot of the old translations.
Did Apocrypha mention anything about that?
Who? What's that?
Apocrypha, does that mention anything about that?
No. But the thing that I would say is, see, that's how I would translate it. When I look at the Hebrew, because I spent a bit of time looking at this. And so in trying to take what the King James says, I can't find how these events are not like the latter event. Right? Now, the thing is, it talks about the former and the latter. So the thing I like about that is that it's going to then talk about what I would consider to be the latter, right? That is the fall of Western Rome. But there's another way to translate it. I mean, see, they're taking it shall not be as the former or not as the latter, right? But that's not necessarily correct in Hebrew. That I can't just say because it says not, and then I have two things that both of them are not. So what I think is it says that the latter shall not be as the former. I think that makes more sense in Hebrew. And that's actually the most common way it's translated. Now, there are a lot other translations shall it not be like the former or the latter. And there's ones that says the latter shall not be like the former. And I think the latter one is better, where the latter shall not be like the former. And that's how Bishops translates it. The last shall not be as the first.
Sounds like that would make more sense.
Well, yeah, it actually makes more sense, and it makes more sense in Hebrew, right? So I'm not saying the other way is certainly wrong, but when I look at the Hebrew here, I don't see sentence structure allows for that. So
It's kind of confusing, a little confusing.
yeah, because it's just shall not be. So in Hebrew, just velo techeya. That's not be, and then it has so it's got the article, adjective, feminine, singular, absolute, former, and then it has the exact same form as the latter, or the western, or the behind. So it's very, to me, I would have translated this that it shall not be as that the former shall not be, or the latter shall not be as the former. The first shall not be as the last. Or wait, yeah, the last shall not be as the first. That's the way I would do it. So that's the way I would have translated it. But I'm not saying that this is wrong. I'm just saying that that's another alternate translation. So the latter shall not be as the former. And that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, even just structurally and contextually. So I don't know what people think about that. I mean, I'm usually, a bit reluctant to just say, well, King James is wrong in how it translated this year. Now, it is interesting that other commentaries that don't have the position that we do, when they look at when it talks about the latter, they actually refer it to Daniel 11, verse 40 to 45. Right? So the way that they're looking at this is a little bit different, but they're seeing that there is a reference to those other verses. So that's why we say at the time appointed, this would be the latter. If they're doing it in this way, what they would be saying is that the latter, that is what's going to happen in 1989, if we are going to make our application, is not going to be as it was in 1798. Would that make sense? That here, so it's going to be talking about what happens in 1989, because it says this history is going to be repeated, right? So maybe the way that we would look at this is we would just say that that this isn't talking about the former as being the fall of Egypt. And here the former would have to be 1798 and the latter would be 1989. So that would be how we would have to translate that. So I'm going to put that in here just as an option and something that we can consider. So a completely different way to look at this is, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to put this in here. Let me give it a different structure there. Put it in here as an option. So the time appointed, right? This is papacy, the USA king shall return and come toward the south. But it shall not be as the former. So if we did that, it'd be 1798. That's one way we could look at it, or we could put Actium in there. Let me see here. So we could put that, or as the latter. Then we would put here 1798. Okay, that's how I do it. So we're saying that the former is the fall of Egypt. The latter is 1798, not the fall of Rome. And so that's one way of doing it. Another way, I don't know why I did that. Hang on. Okay. And then we have or. We could have this. So another way of deciding on this. Okay, so we're gonna, oh, I didn't want it that way. So this is going to be the most different of them. So that then we're going to say that the latter, so the latter is going to be 1989. So we'd have to go here. Oops. We're going to arrange the order of the sentence. The latter, 1989, shall not be as the former. No. And the former being 1798. So that's another way of looking at it. So we get basically three different options. So what do we think about this? You can see them there. So our original way that the latter is just referring to the fall of Western Rome, and that 1989 is similar to the fall of Egypt and the fall of Western Rome, but it's also different. Or the former is the fall of Egypt, the latter is 1798. Right? So that's another option, because it's saying 1989 is like the fall of Egypt because it's a battle against the king of the north and the king of the south, but it's not literal. But it's going to be different than 1798 in that it's not the king of the south defeating the king of the north, it's the king of the north defeating the king of the south. Or that it is, but the latter shall not be as the former, the latter being the one that they're referring to, the time appointed. The latter time appointed, 1989, shall not be as the former, that is the time appointed, and time of the end in 1798. Okay, so we have three different options. Does that make sense? That these options are all viable to some degree?
To some degree, yes.
Okay, right. So they're all viable to some, they're not all correct. I think we can agree on that. So we've got these other ways of looking at it. So how are we going to decide between these? So the problem with the first one that we have is that if this is describing the fall of Western Rome, there are some good things. One is the fall of Western Rome is what's going to be described next. Okay. And the Battle of Actium is the former, and the fall of Western Rome is the latter. The problem is we can't figure out how 1989 is different than the fall of Western Rome. We can see how it's the same, but there's not a real clear reason why they would say it's not as the latter, right? Because it's pretty clear that these two histories are typifying what's happening, if this is the case. But I'm not sure how the latter one, the fall of Western Rome, what characteristic we would see that's different, that would be clearly different, why it's not like the latter, right? So if we had some really good reason, I would still prefer to keep that version. Now, the middle one I like quite a bit. It keeps the King James, right? But it just says, well, we're going to have this time appointed in November 9th, 1989. And it's going to be a battle between the North and the South, right? But not like in Egypt, because that was dealing with the literal North and South. Or as what happens in 1798, because that's going to be the South defeating the King of the North, right? So they're similar, but the differences are, one is symbolic and one is literal. So we have a literal symbolic difference. And we also have the fact that the powers are switched. And that is logical, right? Why they would bring that up, that it's not as the latter, that it's not like in 1798, because in 1798 was the King of the South defeating the King of the North, Daniel 11, verse 48. So it's not going to be like that in that way, okay? Or the other option is that the latter shall not be as the former. So the latter would be 1989, the former would be 1798. That means it's not addressing in this verse the Battle of Actium and the fall of Egypt, or the fall of Western Rome. Right? In the second one, it's not addressing the fall of Western Rome specifically. But we can see that it still follows that what happens with the fall of Western Rome is typifying what's happening at the end. Right? Because this is going to be the fall of Western Rome, the setting up of the papacy. So how do we decide between these three different interpretations? I'm going to do it this way too. Any comments on that? So nobody's got any thoughts about this? I mean, I could repeat myself, say it all over. We understand the three different options, right?
It'll take some investigating with other scriptures to sort this out.
Well, the thing, all of them are viable. That is, there isn't one that jumps out at me and says, this is wrong. Right? All three of them are possibilities.
Yeah, the possibilities.
Just, we could say some are stronger than others, right? They all have their reasons why we would use them. There isn't really much against any of them as they stand on their own. If somebody had done this document and they gave me just one of these, I wouldn't say, well, that's completely wrong. That can't be, right? They all can be. And none of them, negate what's going to follow then with the fall of Rome being next. It's there next. It's going to be talked about. In verse 29, it's going to be specifically referred to as the latter. Right? If we're going to take it as the fall of Western Rome, that's what the latter is. But there's no problem saying that the latter is 1798 and that the former is the Battle of Actium. And there's also no problem with saying, well, the former is 1798 and the latter is not, which is 1989, isn't going to be like the former in some particular way. So we have a reason. And we do kind of have a reason how it's not like the latter, but it's not a reason. So the problem with the first one is it's not a reason that that naturally results of why it should be mentioned, right? Why would you say it's not as the former? I can understand why they're saying it's not like what happened with literal King of the North and the King of the South. But I can't see why they would say, well, it's not like the latter. Like they wouldn't need to say that, right? Because mostly it's like the latter. And there's a real specific reason why it's not like the former, why we need to know that. Unless there's some real specific reason as why it's not as the latter as well, then I would have a hard time supporting that first example. The second one, the strength is that it retains the King James, and the former is going to be what it just talked about, and the latter is the time appointed that had been mentioned earlier in verse 27, that we marked as 1798. And so it says that those things are similar, but it's not going to be like in 1798. It's going to be like the King of the North defeating the King of the South. That's what we had in Actium. It's going to be like that, right? It's not going to be like it in the sense that it's not literal, but also it's not going to be the same in that in this case, it's in 1798, it's going to be the King of the South defeating the King of the North. So it's not going to, and so that would have a really good reason why it's not as latter, right? So 1989 is not like 1798. In the last one, the time appointed, again, we're going to have it as November 9th, 1989. Right? So that doesn't change. But then it says But the latter, that is 1989, is the one that's the latter. It shall not be as the former referring to 1798. So there's things I like about this one. There's things I like about each one of them. So how could we resolve this? I mean, we've looked at all this information. We find that all three are consistent. Would there be something that would have one of these interpretations as a better interpretation? Now, I like the Hebrew better in the last one, but the latter shall not be as the former. That makes more sense. But I have no problem with the second one. Because it's already talked about the fall of Egypt, and it's, that's dealing with 1798, right? Because when we go back here, right, where it talks about both these kings shall be to do mischief, both these kings' heart shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table. But it shall not prosper. For yet the end, so that's going to be verse 28. But the end shall be at the time appointed. So I think, no, that's verse 27. Then verse 28 starts, then shall he return. Okay. So it's in verse 27 that we have that the end shall be at the time appointed. So we say that that's the prophetic periods. So if that's the case, then this is this is going to be the former in this one, 1798. In this one, 1798 is called the latter, right? So to me, it's more consistent with this one. If we understand that in verse 27, it's talking about at the time appointed. So we have a former time appointed. That's going to be the former one, 1798. And the latter one's going to be the one in verse 29, at the time appointed, where the king of the north comes against the king of the south. So I like this third one. I think it's the most consistent in my mind, whether my mind matters or not. But they're all viable. Now the problem here would then be when we go into verse 30. So he's going to say in verse 29 that there's going to be this time appointed in 1989, right? Because he shall return. So this return is what's being talked about, is the fact that this is going to be repeated. So he's going to return. Shall come toward the south, right? So the United States and the papacy against the USSR. But this time, it shall not be as the former. That is, this time, and the former here being the first time, which is 1798, and the latter time being 1989. Now then it's going to say in which, right? So now it's going to go to the fall of Rome. And it's going to make a parallel between what happens in 1989 and what happens with the fall of Rome. just as it did with what happened with the Battle of Actium. So this verse isn't particularly connecting these two, which in our first interpretation it is. So it says, in which the ships of Kittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against the Holy Covenant. So now it's saying that what has happened with the fall of Rome, that there is this same type of returning. And just like the 1260 years of paganism, there's this persecution that's going to happen towards Christianity, towards the truth. So shall he do. He, pagan Rome, shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant, apostate Christianity. So, and then we have an arm shall stand on his part. Now, we haven't done the present truth application of these verses yet. Right? So now we're going to have the rise of the papacy. And so we know that this is still typifying what he's talking about earlier. So it doesn't flow as smoothly, except that we could look at this verse 29 as almost parenthetical to what he's discussing earlier. That is, it's answering the time appointed, which is going to be not at the end of the prophetic periods, but is going to be a repeat of it. Okay. So it doesn't flow quite the same, but it's still not a problem to have a verse that's parenthetical, that's addressing specific history. So then it's going to say, so if we looked at this, so we got pagan heart, pagan Rome's heart shall be against the Holy Covenant, right? And in which, right, which I put there, just bo would mean more in, not for, is, or boo actually, is not numbered or translated in Strong's. Best translated is in which the ships of Kittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be grieved and return and have indignation against, which is the daily, against the Holy Covenant. So shall he do. He shall even return and have intelligence with them that forsake the Holy Covenant. Right? So this is continuing this description of pagan Rome that we have in verse 28. So this would make verse 29 parenthetical. Does that make sense? Because what's mentioned in verse 28 is Rome returns to its own land after it does some persecution. Then persecution is going to come against Rome, right? The ships of Kittim. And now Rome is going to have to respond to this. It's going to be more returning. And, right? And it's going to continue to persecute God's people. And then he's not just going to persecute, he's going to have intelligence with those that have forsaken the Holy Covenant. So the way that pagan Rome, wins this sort of situation where it's being, destroyed, right? It's going to pass on its characteristics to this apostate Christian power. So Rome's going to be taken over by the Germanic invasions, right? And then this part of Western Rome that's been conquered is going to support the papacy. It's going to provide the military might for setting up the papacy on the throne of the earth. So what should we do here? Should we try to find out the parallel to our time here? in the present truth application. Oh. Now here, when we take this verse and we take it out parenthetically, it is actually just describing the present truth history. That is, we can't take, well, we could, I mean, we obviously parallel it to lots of different things. So, you know, we could compare November 9th to, you know, November 9th, 2019, and we could have some kind of internal application of this. But this is a verse that actually is telling us that all of this history is going to be fulfilled at the end of time in this line that we have from November 9th, 1989. So a present truth application of it isn't necessary because it is a present truth application. Does that make sense? Are people following what I'm doing here?
I'm trying.
Okay. So what do you need? Talk to me so that I can understand what your thought process is. Maybe I can help.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
Okay.
So,
Well, can you think out loud? Of
I'm trying to.
Well, can you repeat back to me what you think I've said about the three different interpretations, the three possibilities of verse 29?
It's almost like we're trying to cover 3 octaves at once.
Okay.
That's
Well,
kind of hard. Go ahead.
well, could we argue that all three are correct?
I'm not disagreeing. All 3 of them have elements that are correct.
Right. So that, you know, now that seems kind of odd, you know, but we've done that with other verses, right? The one that talks about the times, even for a time. And we found that we had 2 different periods, 2 different ways we could interpret the word. You know, it'd be, you know, from the or against, right? The fortresses, the strongholds, from or against the strongholds, even for a time. So we had 2 different, and we agreed that both were correct. But is there some way in which we can address these? Okay, so while we're thinking about this a little bit, I'm just going to change gears and talk about something that Iran and I were talking about prior to the study. Because we had mentioned yesterday about March 11th, 2020. And March 11th, 2020, the significance of it is, and I'm just going to put it in here, make sure I got this here. So that's going to be the date in which they declare the pandemic in the US or worldwide, or who?
US.
So in the US, it's going to be March 11th. Is there a worldwide date in which they declare the pandemic?
It seemed to follow after March 11th.
Okay, so so they kind of had it. So I know this is a way different topic, but I just want to address this and come back to some of it. So obviously we had this March. So it says here, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak. So first it's an outbreak, a public health emergency of international concern on the 30th of January 2020, and assessed the outbreak had become a pandemic on the 11th of March 2020. So that's going to be the World Health Organization that declares that. They ended this on the 5th of May 2023. As of 21st of March 2024, the pandemic has caused 7 million confirmed deaths. It's not very many. Okay. So that's where the March 11th date is. Now, if let's go back. So if we count back from March 11th, we come to, if we count back 186 days, that is, we go back to September 7th, 2019. September 7th, 2019 is what? Anybody remember the significance of that date? That's going to be when Jeff stands up, comes out of retirement, as Iran says there, and he's going to speak against the movement, right? And that's going to be 63 days before November 9th, 2019. So it's interesting that from that date, we count the 187th day is March 11th. Now, Iran has this Bible indexer. So you're familiar with that Bible indexer. And the number of verses in the Bible, so that is, I guess, how do we do that? It's 31,102. Is that what it is? Or it's just that if we're counting, how does that work, Iran?
Yeah, total number of verses in the Bible is 31,102.
And March 11th is 3120. So it's just the 0 and the 2 are switched, but it has the same iteration of numbers. And so now the other significance of so in Genesis 1:1, for instance, the reverse sum is 777, right? That's what it says here. Yeah. And there's 1,533 verses in Genesis, right?
Yeah.
The lexical sum is 18602. So you got that 186, which is the number of days from the first day of the first month to the 10th day of the seventh month, and it has the 02 in there. It's the 66th reverse chapter of the Bible, or book number, reverse chapter. I always have trouble reading the order of these things. Now, where's the 391 how do we deal with that, Haran? So we know that if we count from September 11th and you go back 391 and a half days, it brings you to August 11th, not 2018. And that's just logical because that's 63 days before October 13th, 2018. And I count 391 and a half days from that to November 9th. So the 63 days just is shifted over. But what was the significance of the 391 and a half in connection with March 11th? Or am I not understanding it correct?
There's a 391 and a half from August 11th. I forget what year, but it comes up to September 7th.
Okay, so from August 11th in 2018, yeah, there's 391 and a half to September 7th, 2019. And August 11th is connected to a 391, right? And
Right.
half a month in the original symbol, right? Back to Revelation 9. So, okay.
Yeah, and it's the same structure as the Bible because you have a 391.5 that leads up to the 187 last verses of the Bible.
Okay, that was the other one. So explain that.
Well, in the Bible, we already said how many verses there are. It's 30,000.
31,000.
915 verses plus 187 verses add up to 31102 verses.
So it's 30915.
Yes.
Okay. So that is, so we have all those number of verses in the Bible, right? And see there. So if we take this number, which is 391.5, but it just has that zero in there, plus 187 is going to give us the number of verses in the Bible. So these two symbols are together. Okay. Now, I know that's a completely different topic, but I just wanted to address it. And now there is a connection. So the connection that we had to deal with was this, because we were looking at the pandemic, right? We were looking at this, they all tell lies at one table, and we were connecting this to 9/11. Okay. So we have this number 7979. Now that brought us to, depending on whether we counted it as inclusive or cardinal, that was going to bring us to 2023. Let me see, 2020. I'm just trying to figure this out. 2020. Yeah, 2020. And that was going to bring us to February 27th. So if I go to February 27th, 2020, is that it? No. I'm trying to figure out. No, I'm doing this wrong. No, I think it was 2023. I'm trying to remember what we did. So we had September 11th, and I counted 7979. Okay, that brought me to July 17th, 2023. And then I counted 259 days, which is, okay, that brought me to April 1st. There was something else that brought me to February 27th. What was that? In 2020. So that was another word. So oh, that was 6743. And 6743 was what? Anybody remember what we did? How we got 6743? Maybe it's in my notes. Yes, that was, 6743. This was this other word. Okay. That's going to be shall not prosper. That was the one. Okay, so I got those two mixed up. So 6743, that's going to bring us by itself. So I'm just trying to figure out what I did there. So 6743, and then I added that from August 1st. Huh. Okay. So 6743 brings me to February 27th, 2020. And then from that date, if I count 3808, right, that's the one that brings me to August 1st, 2030. Okay, now I got it remembered. Okay, that makes sense. So I need to put that in my notes as well. So we got the one where we add the two together, shall not prosper. That's going to go from 9/11 to August 1st, 2030. That's going to be the fifth day of the, or first day of the fifth month. So it's another symbol in 2030. And in 2030, we hit the first day of the first month is April 5th, which is the fifth day of the fourth month. And then we have this shall not prosper, this alliance, right, with the UN. And it's marking the first day of the fifth month in 2030. And we also have the 10th day of the seventh month in 2030 connected with this study of the 354 days of 457 BC. Right, so there's two different ways that we can count the 354 months from 9/11. One will bring us to the first day of the first month in 9/11, or not 2030, and the other one will bring us to the 10th day of the seventh month in 2030. Okay, so just put here from so we have February 27th, 2020 is 6743 days. Okay, so we have the number of days there. So we were looking at that, and then we were talking about the March 11th. Now, there's 13 days from February 27th, 2020. So what does that mean about March 11th, 2020? Can we see that February 27th, Julian, is March 11th, 2020, Gregorian? So if we take the word prosper and we count from 9/11, it's going to bring us to February 27th, 2020 on the Gregorian calendar. But can we see that February 27th, 2020 symbolizes March 11th, 2020 when the pandemic is declared?
What happened on February 27th?
Nothing. Right? March 11th is the date, right? Yeah. February 27th is symbolizing March 11th. And from February 27th, if we count the 3808, it will bring us to the first day of the fifth month in 2030. So it's going to deal with this. And can we see that the World Health Organization declaring the pandemic is a result of this union with spiritualism, right? The United States union with.
I can see that.
Okay.
Sunday law, right?
Right. So we can see the height of it prosper. This symbolizes then this unity between what happens at 9/11 and what happens at March 11. Right? The they're connected with this word prosper. But if we count the word not, it's going to bring us to 2030. Okay. So you can see how this connects. Hopefully you can understand that. It's not super straightforward, but we have had this before where we have a Julian date lining up with a Gregorian date, and the Julian date is the symbol or the calculation.
This is not on a line yet. Put on a
Yeah.
line yet.
Yeah, when we draw these things out, it'll make more sense.
Yeah.
The thing is to get the idea here that we have this connection. So if we go back to our document, right? So we're saying it shall not prosper. So the speaking lies at one table. What we're taking is this history that precedes the Battle of Actium, this alliance between Octavian and Antony. They're going to speak lies at one table. And we're saying that this is a false alliance that is marked by 9/11. And so we count from 9/11 the word table. And when we do that, we come to June 17th, 2023. And that's going to be the HESI 2023 Global Forum connected at UN headquarters, right? It's going to be talking about the recovery from COVID-19 and the full implementation of the 2030 agenda, right? So that's the whole purpose of that. So it marks that. So that's why we take this 7979, okay? And then we have 259 days further brings us to April 1st, 2024, which is April Fool's Day. And I basically have said that, you know, this whole agenda, the 2030 agenda, is juvenile, right? That is, the World Economic Forum is just a juvenile organization. It's a bunch of people who have no practical experience in anything. They happen to be wealthy, you know, you got actors and all these types of things, but, you know, people who are out of touch with reality. And it's an atheistic organization. So it ties that together. So the lies at one table is this alliance with the atheistic power that the United States has made on September 11th, right? So we can count these from September 11th. We also have this connection with the UN where it's saying it will not prosper, right? So this speaking lies at one table will not prosper. And that's going to give us these symbolic dates that connect us to the pandemic and then to 2030, August 1st, 2030, which is the first day of the fifth month in 2030. So that all makes sense. So we have this here. So the alliance there doesn't last, neither will this alliance last in the way that it is, right? So the United States has made an alliance with the UN. It's reached its hand across the abyss to spiritualism, right? But in doing so, the UN has conquered the United States, right? In this context.
Yeah.
But in the end, the United States is going to be the power that brings about, that is the false prophet, is going to bring in the Sunday law. This is not something that the UN was seeking, right? They had their own agenda. Their agenda is going to end. They are going to then submit to the agenda that's going to be put forward by the US.
See the religious right rising up now.
Right. So, and that's what, that's what we've always expected, that something has to happen in the world that will cause a religious Sunday law. not a Sunday law that's for the environment. Because that's not a Sunday law, is it? It's not a family day Sunday law. It is a religious Sunday law, correct? In order for Satan and the papacy to have their way, that Sunday law has to be religious. Do we agree on that?
Yeah, it's gonna have a death decree, it'll have a death decree with it. Or
And it's a religious Sunday law.
matter of worship.
Yeah,
Issue
it's a
of worship.
matter of worship. Yeah, exactly, right? And it's not about worshiping Mother Nature, right? This is an image to the beast, to the papacy, to this satanic power that we call the papacy. So all of these other things about, Earth days types of things and turning it into, a weekly thing, that doesn't fulfill the purposes of the Sunday law. It has to be a religious Sunday law. And so that means the world has to wonder after the beast, that they're going to worship the beast and his image. The image is the United States enacting this Sunday law. Okay, so we'll come back to this on Sunday. It'll give time for people to think about the things we studied today. Consider verse 29, and we'll see what will happen next week. Any final thoughts before we close with prayer? Okay, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the study today and all the things that you teach us. Please be with each person. Watch over them. Guide and direct our steps today. May your angels care be with those that we love. And help us, Lord, to trust fully in you. Bring us together again to study your word. We pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen.